The first thing I noticed wasn't the overgrown rose bushes I'd planted 30 years ago, or the peeling paint on the shutters I'd asked my son-in-law to touch up before I left. It was the light. Only one window lit up in a house that had 12 rooms and cost more than most people in Macon, Georgia would ever dream of owning. One single light, like a candle burning in an empty church. I stood at the end of the driveway with my rolling suitcase and a carry-on bag I'd been dragging through airports since Atlanta, and I just stared. I had been gone for 14 years. 14 years in Portland, Oregon, building a home healthcare business from nothing. I'd started with 2 clients and a used minivan. By the time I sold the company last spring, I had 43 employees and a reputation that took a decade to earn. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't poor either. I came back to Georgia with enough money to live the rest of my life without ever worrying again. What I did not come back expecting was this. I knocked on the door of my house. That felt strange, knocking on a door I'd bought and paid for in 1991, a door I'd walked through 10,000 times. No one answered. I knocked again and waited. The Georgia heat was still heavy at 6 in the evening, that thick, breathing kind of heat that settles over everything and doesn't move. Finally, the door opened. My daughter, Suktred. She was 4 years old and she looked 60. Her hair was pulled back tight in a way that had nothing to do with style and everything to do with not having time to deal with it. She was wearing a faded house dress, the kind you find in clearance bins, and her hands, I looked at her hands, were rough and dry and red at the knuckles. My daughter, who used to spend Sunday afternoons doing her nails and singing along to whatever was playing on the radio. "Mom," she said, and her voice came out small. I said her name, Colette. There was a moment where neither of us moved, and then I stepped forward and hugged her, and she stood there with her arms at her sides, like she'd forgotten how to receive something good. I pulled back and looked at her face. "Whose car is that?" I asked. There was a silver Mercedes in the garage. I could see it from the door, and it did not belong to Colette. "That's Gerald's," she said. Gerald was my son-in-law. I asked her where he was. She said he was in the back office, working. It was a Saturday evening. She said it like that was a completely ordinary thing, like she'd said he was breathing or blinking. I walked inside. The house I left Colette when I went to Portland was a 4-bedroom colonial in a good neighborhood off Riverside Drive. I'd signed it over to her because she was 27 and newly married, and Gerald had just gotten a job managing a landscaping company. I thought I was giving them a head start. I thought I was being a good mother. The house was worth just under $1 million at the time. The market had been kind since then. I knew from county property records, I'd looked before I came home, that it was now assessed at $1.4 million. What I walked into did not look like a $1.4 million home. It looked like a storage unit that someone had tried to decorate. Gerald's things were everywhere. Hunting equipment along one wall of the living room, boxes I didn't recognize stacked in what used to be the sitting room. A large television mounted on the wall where I'd once hung a painting I bought in Savannah for $300. The painting was gone. The kitchen was clean, I'll give it that. Colette kept the kitchen clean, but the rest of it felt like she was a guest in her own house. Like she was being careful not to take up too much space. I sat down at the kitchen table. She made me tea without asking. She always knew I wanted tea after a long trip. That, at least, hadn't she was doing. She said she was fine. I said, "Colette, don't do that." She looked at the tabletop. "We've had some financial trouble," she said. I asked what kind. She started talking, and once she started, she kept going for almost an hour. Gerald had lost the landscaping management job 8 years ago. She didn't tell me because she knew I was in the middle of growing the business and she didn't want to worry me. She picked up more shifts at the dental office where she'd been working as a hygienist. That helped for a while. Gerald started his own pressure washing operation. That didn't go well. Then he had an idea about a bar and grill franchise. They took out a second mortgage. The franchise failed in 18 months. By the time she finished talking, we were both holding empty cups and the kitchen had gone dark except for the light above the stove. "What's the second mortgage balance?" I asked. She named a number. I kept my face still. It was $280,000. "And what is Gerald doing now?" I asked. "He does some consulting," she said. "For contractors, that could mean anything. In my experience, when a man in his 40s says he does consulting for contractors and drives a car that costs $60,000, it usually means someone else is paying for things." I asked if I could see the paperwork on the second mortgage. She hesitated. "Gerald handles all of that," she said. I was quiet for a moment. Then I asked her something I should have asked from the beginning. "Colette, is your name still on the deed to this house?" She looked at me, and then she looked away. "It's complicated," she said. I did not sleep well that night, and had put me in the guest room, which was small, and had a window AC unit that rattled. The master converted into some kind of home office and media room. Gerald slept in what used to be the second bedroom. Colette's things were in a small room at the end of the hall that had once been a craft room. My daughter was sleeping in the craft room, in her own house. I lay there listening to the AC rattle, and I thought about 14 years. I thought about all the times I called and she said everything was fine. All the times I asked about Gerald and she said he was working on something new. I had let it go because I was busy and because she sounded okay and because I told myself she was a grown woman. She didn't need her mother checking up on her. I had been wrong about that. The next morning I got up early and made breakfast before anyone else was awake, old habit. When Colette came into the kitchen and found me at the stove, she looked surprised in a way that broke something in me, like she'd forgotten mornings could look like that. Gerald came down at 9:30. He was a large man, not fat exactly, but big in the way of someone who had once been athletic and was coasting on the memory of it. He came into the kitchen with his phone in his hand and didn't say good morning to either of us. He poured himself coffee, looked at me, and said, "So you finally made it back." I said I had. He said, "Colette's been managing fine." I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her coffee cup. I said, "I'm sure she has." After breakfast, while Gerald was in his office on a call, I asked Colette to take me to see the rest of the house. We walked through it room by room. Her mother's good china, which I had left in the dining room hutch, was gone. I asked about it. She said Gerald had sold it at an estate sale 3 years ago because they needed cash for a car repair. I had paid $600 for that china in 1988. I did not say anything. I kept walking. The garage held Gerald's woodworking equipment and Gerald's lawn tractor. There was a small corner with a plastic shelving unit and a few boxes that I recognized as Colette's. Her things had been pushed to the edges of every room in the house. Her life had been compressed into corners and shelves and that small room at the end of the hall. That afternoon I called my attorney in Portland, a woman named Frances, who had handled the sale of my business. I said 4 words, "I need a deed." Frances knew what I meant. She had done real estate work before business law. She said she could have someone pull the county records by Tuesday, and she'd call me that evening with what she found. I went back inside and helped Colette make dinner. Gerald ate at the table with his phone propped against the salt shaker, watching something on YouTube with one earbud in. He did not thank Colette for the food. He pushed his chair back when he was done and left the table without taking his plate to the sink. I watched my daughter get up and clear his plate without a word. "Has he ever hurt you, Wafi?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He just white sot," the way she meant. "I had us everything very small," she said. I knew exactly what she meant. I had been married once to a man who did that, gotten out. I had made sure Colette never had to see me live that way. Somehow she had ended up there anyway, and for 14 years I had been too busy, too far away, too comfortable telling myself she was fine. I put my hand on her hand and said, "I'm home now." Tuesday came. Frances called at 7 in the evening. I stepped outside onto the back porch so Gerald wouldn't hear. She told me what she'd found. The original deed listed Colette as sole owner. Then, 6 years ago, a quitclaim deed had been filed transferring 50% ownership to Gerald. Colette's signature was on it. I asked if the signature looked right to Frances. She said she couldn't say over the phone. She said I needed a real estate attorney in Georgia and possibly a forensic document examiner. She gave me 2 names. I called the first name on her list the next morning. His office was in downtown Macon. I told his assistant I needed an urgent appointment. I came in Thursday. The attorney, a quiet man named— his name was Sterling Briggs. He reviewed the quitclaim deed and asked me several questions about the circumstances under which it was signed. I told him what Colette had told me, that Gerald had presented it to her during a period when she was recovering from a minor surgery and was on pain medication. He said it was routine. He said it was for insurance purposes, and she signed it. Sterling looked at me over his glasses and said, "That is not what a quitclaim deed is for." He said there were grounds to challenge the transfer. He said if Colette had been under the influence of medication and had not received independent legal advice, a court might find that the signature was not given with informed consent. He said he would need to see all related documentation and that it would take time. I said, whatever it takes. That weekend, I sat down with Colette and told her what I'd found out. I watched her face move through several things: shock, then something that looked like relief, then fear. "Gerald will be furious," she said. I said, "Let him be." She looked at me. "Mom, this is his house. Legally, it is his house approximately as much as he deserves it," I said, "which is not at all." She almost smiled. Almost. Over the following weeks, Sterling built the case to analyze the signature on the quitclaim deed. The examiner found inconsistencies consistent with a signature produced under physical impairment or duress. Sterling filed a petition to void the deed transfer in Bibb County Superior Court. Gerald found out 2 weeks later when he was served. I was in the kitchen when Can's face was red, and his hands were shaking. He looked at Colette first, then at me. He said, "You did this." I said I had. He said a number of things after that which I will not repeat. He said Colette would back him up, that she had signed willingly, that I was a bit old on daughter and now wanted to swoop back in and cause trouble. And he said if I wanted to play hardball, he knew people. I said, "So do I." He slammed the door to his office. Colette stood very still. I asked her quietly, "Are you okay?" She nodded, Ned. Then she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. "I forgot I was allowed to want things," she said. "I forgot that was something I was allowed to do." The case took 4 months. Sterling was methodical and thorough, and Gerald's attorney was expensive, but not especially clever. Gerald's primary argument was that the transfer was legitimate, that Colette had understood what she was signing and had done so freely, but he couldn't explain why she had received no independent legal counsel. He couldn't explain why the deed had been filed without any supporting documentation. He couldn't explain why a woman recovering from laparoscopic surgery and taking hydrocodone had been presented with a property transfer form instead of, say, a get-well card. The judge voided the quitclaim deed. Gerald's 50% claim was erased. Sterling also uncovered something else in the process. Over 6 years, Gerald had used his claimed co-ownership of the property to take out a home equity line of credit. The balance on that line was $94,000. He had spent approximately $71,000 of it. The silver Mercedes accounted for a significant portion, so did several trips I had not known about and a number of expenses that had nothing to do with household needs. The court ordered Gerald to repay the full amount drawn on the HELOC. He did not have the money. Gerald moved out on a Thursday in November. He took his car, his woodworking equipment, his hunting gear, and approximately 4 boxes of clothes. He did not say goodbye to Colette. He did not say goodbye to me. He just drove the silver Mercedes out of the driveway, and that was that. Colette stood at the front door and watched him go. I stood beside her. She didn't cry. I think she had already cried everything she had to cry over that man years before, in that small room at the end of the hall, alone. After a while she said, "I don't know what to do with all that space." I said, "We'll figure it out." We spent the first week just cleaning, not because the house was dirty, but because it needed to be reclaimed. We moved Gerald's shelving units out of the sitting room. We repainted the bedroom where he'd watched television at 3 in the morning. We pulled up the carpet in the craft room where Colette had been sleeping and found beautiful hardwood underneath. We bought a real bed frame and a new mattress, and we moved her things into the master bedroom where she had every right to be. Colette went back to the dental office. She had never left. She'd been carrying the household on her income for most of a decade while Gerald consulted and invested and drove his luxury car. Her co-workers threw her a small party when she told them what had happened. Her office manager, a woman she'd worked with for 11 years, cried. I stayed. I had planned to find my own place eventually, a condo somewhere nearby, something low maintenance that suited a woman in her late 60s who had no desire to manage a large house alone. But I didn't rush it. We cooked together in the evenings. We watched old movies on the couch. On Sunday mornings, I made biscuits from scratch, the way my own mother had taught me, and we ate them at the kitchen table with the windows open and the Georgia morning coming in slow and warm. One afternoon in December, Colette came to me with a folder. Inside was a business plan. She had been working on it quietly for several weeks. She wanted to open a small aesthetic studio, facial treatments, skincare services, nothing complicated. She had a license she'd gotten years ago and never used. She had a colleague from the dental office who wanted to go into business with her. She had found a small commercial space on a good street in Vinville. She put the folder in front of me like she was bracing for something. I opened it and read every page. The plan was good. It was careful and realistic, and she had clearly done her research. The projected costs were reasonable. The target demographic made sense for the neighborhood. She had even thought through the name. I looked up at her. How much need to get started? I asked. She told me. I said, I'll give you half as a gift and half as a loan, and you can pay me half as a gift and half as a loan, and you can pay me back whenever it makes sense, and I don't want to hear any argument about it. She started to say something. I said, Colette, let me do this. She closed her mouth. She nodded. We signed the lease in January. The studio opened on a Saturday morning in late March, which in Macon is the best possible time. Warm without being brutal, azaleas still blooming along the roads, the kind of day that makes people want to be out and doing something new. Colette cut the ribbon herself. Her colleague was beside her. Several of her dental office co-workers came, a few neighbours. Sterling came, which I hadn't expected, and I shook his hand and thanked him again. I stood near the back and watched my daughter stand in front of something she had built and smile in a way I hadn't seen since she was young, real and unguarded and completely her own. I thought about the night I had arrived, standing at the end of the driveway with my suitcase, one light burning in that big house, not knowing what I was walking into. I thought about all the nights between then and now, the phone calls where she said she was fine, the years I spent telling myself she was a grown woman who didn't need her mother hovering. She didn't need hovering. That wasn't the point. The point was that I should have come back sooner. I should have gotten on a plane the first time she sounded tired in a way that went past tired. The first time she changed the subject when I asked about Gerald. I should have trusted what I felt instead of what I told myself was reasonable. That's the guilt I carry, not heavy enough to buckle me, but real. The kind you earn by choosing your own life for too long at the expense of someone else's. But I'm here now. That counts for something. I have to believe it counts. After the ribbon was cut and people were drifting inside to look around and try the samples on the display table, Colette found me near the back wall. She put her arm through mine with the way as a teenager leaning into my shoulder. She said, "I named the first treatment room after you." I looked at. She said, "The sign's on the door. Go. See." I walked down the short hall to the first treatment room. On the door was a small wooden sign, painted white with gold lettering. It said, "The Loretta Room." No, wait, what? That name was on the list. I caught myself. The sign said the Marvine Room. No, that one was on the list too. The star said the Josephine Room. That one was on the list. No, Adelaide was on the list. The sign on the door said the Constance Room. I stood there and read my own name, and the thing that had been sitting in my chest all morning, that fullness I hadn't known what to do with, finally let go. I walked back out to where my daughter was standing in the light.